So, Old Testament God is angry God, and New Testament God is loving God. At least that's what they say. So, let's talk about why that is. So, first and foremost, you have to understand that God is not just dealing with one particular people group or one particular time period. God is dealing with raising his children in totality, right? The whole of the human race is what he's raising from outside of time. And so if you think of the human race as a whole, through kind of the lens of the progression of a human being as an individual, what you would end up with is something like this. When a baby is born, it doesn't know anything. It only understands you either feed me or you don't feed me, right? You feed me or I'll scream. I need to be protected. I need to be changed. I need to be, every single thing that I need has to be taken care of. Now, as they get older, you can begin to reason with them. You can begin to explain why you did the thing the way you did. You can explain to them that M&Ms are great in, as an occasion, but it's not something that you can just eat all day, every day. But when they're 3, there's no explaining that. And so when a child is 3, the way you demonstrate your love to them, because that's the thing, again, you have to understand, like, they need to know that they're loved. But the way you express love to a 3-year-old is not the way that you express love to a 13-year-old. With a 3-year-old, the way you demonstrate love is by making sure that they feel protected, making sure that they feel provided for, and making sure that they feel chosen. Your 3-year-old has to know that there is a difference between them and the other kids, that if it comes down to it, you're going to have their back, you're going to take their side. Now, the reason for this is that we have to, as parents, we have to provide a framework where our children feel like they can trust us, because if we lose that trust when they're little, they won't trust us when it really matters when they're older. And so when you have a 3-year-old, you have to reduce things down to much more fundamental, almost, I can't remember what the word is because I'm exhausted, but it's like basic needs, right? It's meeting the visceral things. So you're provided for, you're protected, and you're chosen, you're exclusive, you're my child. Right? And they need to feel that. They need to know that there's something unique about them. That specialness is incredibly important. And so now if you go back and you look at the Old Testament, what did God do? He singled Israel out. Exclusivity. You are special. You are my chosen people. You are my child. Right? What else did he do? He constantly protected Israel, even when they were acting a fool, right? And he would discipline them, because it's another thing that you have to do when you have a 3-year-old. You have to discipline. They have to know that when you say, this is how it is, that has to carry weight. Because if it doesn't, you can't protect them. Because if your word doesn't carry weight, then when they go to run out in the street and you say stop, they're just going to keep running because your word carries no weight. So you have to discipline your children so that they know that your word carries weight, so that when it really matters and you yell stop, they actually stop, not because they understand that there's a car out there that could kill them, but because they know that if they don't stop, there is something behind that they should be concerned with. And so this is where things get really interesting is, you could look at this as, oh, well, how does this demonstrate love to people other than Israel? Well, it does in the exact same way that when an orphan sees a family that is operating in a healthy way, where the parents love the children and they discipline them and they take care of them and they provide and they protect them, right? When an orphan sees this, that is demonstrating to the orphan what a healthy relationship with a family looks like. This is why the laws in the Old Testament were written in such a way that outsiders and strangers were able to graft into Israel and become part of their people if they were willing to follow their customs and follow through with all of the processes that were necessary to become part of Israel. Even all the way back in the very deep Old Testament, long before Jesus, God already was planning on integrating the rest of humanity into what he was building with Israel. But he needed to demonstrate love at a 3-year-old level to all of humanity, because this isn't just about one time period or one generation. It's about the totality of humanity going through the process of maturation. You see, we have hindsight. We get to look back on it and see, oh, okay, there was this demonstration of love in the Old Testament. And then that demonstration of love continued to grow and develop and mature as the people matured. And then now we move into Jesus' time. And well, I'll get into what that is here in a minute. So all of that is just to simply say that a lot of what you see in the Old Testament is God engaging with humanity at a 3-year-old level. Provision, protection, exclusivity. That's what he's demonstrating. Israel was the benefactor of that demonstration, but the rest of humanity also got to be the benefactors, because from the outside, they were observing that there's something different about the God in Israel than the gods that they were serving. And so it's not that just because they were, in some cases, the subject of Israel's dominance, right? They also were the benefactors of getting to observe the difference and see, oh, this is something different. This is, we wish our gods behaved this way. We wish our gods had our back and protected us like this, and were jealous for us in this way. So now you fast forward, by the time you get to Jesus' time, what you end up with is kind of like your petulant teenagers that think they know everything, right? They're, I almost imagine it like the rich kids that, haven't quite got the character of their parents. They've just benefited from all the goods. And so, they're at the hotel just trashing things and acting a fool. And, they think they've got the whole thing down, right? So you think, just think about like the Pharisees. They're rolling around with their pious robes. They're like, oh yeah, we got this thing. We get it. We are following the law perfectly. Nailed it. Kudos to us. And then Jesus shows up and he's like, you do realize that if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. You do realize that if you hate your brother, you might as well have murdered him. You do realize that I would prefer mercy over sacrifice. It was almost like that time where, you got a teenager and they get a little big for their britches. And so as a parent, you kind of have to like hard check them with a little bit of reality to be like, oh, there's levels to this. Oh, I was playing a whole different game here. And I feel like that's why the shift feels so abrupt when you move from Old Testament to New Testament, because it's almost like there was this foundation that was laid for like I said, for a 3-year-old, right? And what you're seeing is the development, like God interacting with humanity in the same way that a parent would interact with a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, right? And so all of that has been happening over that thousands of year period of time, God interacting with humanity, but again, demonstrating it with a chosen people, just like in the same way that a parent demonstrates this stuff with their child. God is demonstrating to humanity what a healthy father-child relationship looks like, with Israel being his child, but always with the intention of grafting in the rest of humanity. So when you understand it through this lens, it's not Old Testament God was angry God and New Testament God is loving God. It's Old Testament God is God demonstrating himself at the level of understanding that humanity was at, and laying the template so that when we go through and we try to then understand our relationship to God. So like if we come to God as, as believers in 2025, well, how do we know that God is willing to protect us? I mean, there's nothing in the New Testament about that. So what you end up with is, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek. Where's the protection? Where's the part where God has my back? How do I know that he loves me, or, he's going to take care of me, or he'll protect me? All I see here is God telling me that he'll just let me get my butt whooped. But instead, because of the fact that we have the Old Testament, we can go back and look and say, well, God protected Israel like fiercely. There were people that just barely messed with Israel, and he took like mass vengeance on them. Like the ferocity that the Lord protected Israel with was unreal. And so with that as our backdrop, now we have the context of, okay, God is protecting us, and that's why we can turn the other cheek, because of the fact that he has our back, because of the fact that he will stand up on our behalf, whether in this life or the next, right? We have that context because we can look back and see that that is how God protects the people that he loves. And so if he's asking me to turn the other cheek, there must be more to the story than just allowing me to be beat up. Okay, so to wrap this all up, I know this is not as cohesive as I wanted it to be, but I'm exhausted, and so it is what it is. But I wanted to get this out while it was fresh and on my mind. So wrapping all of this up, what you're seeing Old Testament to New Testament is not a shift in God's character from, angry to forgiving. What you're seeing is the maturation of the relationship between humanity and God. Old Testament is kind of like that 3-year-old to probably like 13 to 15-year-old range. And if you read it, you can even see it. The earlier periods, Leviticus, Exodus, right, were much more severe than some of the later periods. As things went on, there was more latitude for them to make mistakes. There was a lot of, if you hey, come talk to me, let's work this out. But if you do this, I will, do all of these things, and then they go do the thing, and then they cry out to him, and then he relents and he brings them back, right? And so, there's a lot of, you can even see kind of the development, the maturation, moving from like very strict, like this is how it is or you're dead, to being more latitude, more relational over time, leading all the way up to Jesus, where it's like I said, it's kind of that hard check where the parent comes in and like is like, hey, like there's a whole other level to the game here that you're not even aware exists, so let me bring you into reality. And all of this is about God demonstrating what love is. That's it. That's the whole of it. And the same love that says, if somebody messes with you, I will go and wipe out an entire nation because they messed with you, right? The same love that will do that is the same love that says, turn the other cheek. Those two are not, they're not mutually exclusive. They're not opposites. They're part of the same thing. They're facets. You're seeing facets, right? We need to know that God. It's like I kind of think of Moses when the Lord threatened to wipe out all of Israel, and Moses said, no. If you wipe them out, wipe me out too. Right? Moses is putting himself between the people and God as an archetype for Jesus, who ultimately did the same thing, who put himself between us and God. But you have to have all of the facets, because without all of the facets, there's a piece missing. It's kind of like like peace through, like there can be no peace without force to enforce the rules that are necessary to maintain peace. Right? It's like you never want to go to war, but sometimes war is necessary in order to push evil back so that peace can exist. Otherwise, if everybody just does whatever they want, there can be no peace because you have anarchy. Whew, boy, I think I've now gone completely off the topic and into another realm. So, man, I hope that helps. That, and this is something I hear a lot. Is that kind of confusion about Old Testament versus New Testament, and why is there such a difference, and how are these two things compatible? They're compatible because they're not two-dimensional. It's multi-dimensional. It's multifaceted. It's like looking at a diamond with multiple sides and cuts to it. Just because you can only see one side or one side looks different from another doesn't mean it's not part of the diamond. It's all part of it. And this is the issue for us as humans is we a lot of times tend to think very linearly, kind of flat. And we need to remember that that there are multiple facets, and we also need to remember that we are trying to reason and evaluate God's ways with a natural mind. The natural mind is not compatible with God's ways. Only the spiritual mind is compatible. And so when we run into these things where it feels like there's a conflict in Scripture, typically what's happening there is that we're trying to evaluate God's ways with our natural mind, and it's not working because the two things are not compatible. And so what we have to do in that moment is we have to pray for wisdom, and we have to ask the Lord to give us revelation about how these two things work together. And through that revelation, that's when our mind is renewed. It also helps us to tap into the spiritual mind and into the spirit. And as we do that, that is when we begin to think three-dimensionally, four-dimensionally, 10, whatever dimensionality God is, because it says we have the mind of Christ. So that's when we can tap into that multi-dimensional thinking, and that's what's necessary to be able to reconcile all of these seemingly contradictory things that we see in Scripture. All right, that's enough for tonight. As usual, if you want me to talk about a topic, drop it in the comments. I hope this helps somebody. And until next time, love you guys. See ya.